Today, the federal government confirms trials for a new cashless welfare card, preventing recipients from spending money on alcohol and gambling.
In not just Indigenous communities, but non-Indigenous communities, in areas of disadvantage, and where we can see whether this card can make a big difference.
Also ahead, the New South Wales Premier Mike Baird officially launches his party's re-election campaign, promising more jobs, free medication and tax cuts for small businesses. The Tunisian government releases security video showing the gunman responsible for the deadly museum attack that killed one Australian. And Cyclone Nathan sweeps across the Northern Territory's Arnhem Land, packing winds in excess of 150 kilometres an hour. Hello, I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Let's take a quick look at tomorrow's weather first. Brisbane can expect a possible storm. It will be cloudy in Sydney, a shower or two for Melbourne and Adelaide, rain easing for Hobart, a sunny day in Perth and a possible storm for Darwin. The federal government has confirmed there will be a number of trials of a welfare debit card that would stop people spending money on alcohol and gambling. The idea was raised in an Indigenous employment review that Andrew Forrest provided to the government last year. The Social Services Minister Scott Morrison says the trials will take place in Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal communities.
There'll be a number of trials that will be run with the Healthy Welfare Card, which is designed to ensure that we are supporting people in areas of great disadvantage. And it's not just about people in Indigenous communities. We will be trialling the Healthy Welfare Card, which in not just Indigenous communities, but non-Indigenous communities in areas of disadvantage, and where we can see whether this card can make a big difference. So it's a trial process. I think it's an excellent idea. I think you've got to get it right, and you've got to learn the lessons from the trial. So there's no suggestion at this stage that that card will have mainstream application. It's there as a key tool to target particular areas of disadvantage and to see whether it can make the big difference that we believe and hope it can.
The New South Wales Liberal Party has officially launched its election campaign with less than a week until voters go to the polls. The Prime Minister was seen but not heard at the launch in Sydney today, which sought to keep the spotlight firmly on the popular Premier Mike Baird. Mr Baird has pushed his government's economic record and planned to lease the state's poles and wires network to fund major projects. Well, for more, I'm joined in the studio by New South Wales state political reporter Bridget Glanville. Bridget, what happened at the launch today?
Well, as you mentioned, the big push was on the economy, and Mike Baird was consistently reminding people not to vote for Labor and reminded them of the record under 16 years in Labor. He announced that they'll have a target of creating 150,000 new jobs over the next 4 years, and then he talked about a number of ways that he's going to achieve that, which we can have a bit of a listen to actually.
And we have a plan to get there by continuing to take costs out of businesses. Over the past 4 years, businesses have been supported by our payroll tax rebates with over 90,000 applications. And today I announce we will extend the $5,000 payroll tax rebates for companies that employ more people for another 4 years.
That's the New South Wales Premier Mike Baird. And during this campaign, Bridget, we've heard a lot about the sale or the lease of the state's electricity network. Was that, again, a subject at today's launch?
Well, not as much, which is interesting because this is the main difference between the Coalition and Labor, is that the Coalition want to privatise 49% of the state's electricity assets, and Labor don't want to sell it. But it didn't come up that much today, and it could possibly be because even with Coalition voters, things like the ABC's Vote Compass has found that electricity privatisation is deeply unpopular. More than half of voters don't want to see electricity assets privatised. So I think this campaign launch had a very, very strong focus on Mike Baird, on his personality, on his character. They played a lengthy video that had Karen Baird, his wife, it had sort of small business owners, it had an old friend of his talking about things like that he's got bad taste in music, his favourite movies Dumb and Dumber and Naked Gun, and there was a lot of that sort of much more personal things about Mike Baird, which certainly you don't see at many campaign launches. So I think they're really playing on that. They want that message to get through to voters. They're hoping that Mike Baird will get them over the line.
And former Prime Minister John Howard was there as well.
He was there, and he spoke briefly outside about Mike Baird and said that he's always been a fan of Mike's and was happy to be there today. We can hear a bit of him now.
Very, very proud indeed. I've always been a fan of his, and I think he's done a wonderful job as Premier. He's so straightforward, fair dinkum, and he's doing things, and that's what people want.
That's the former Prime Minister John Howard, and the current Prime Minister was also there, Bridget.
He was, and Mike Baird got up and said he's happy to be here, and his friend Tony Abbott to support him. Tony Abbott didn't speak. I actually approached him after it and said, you know, why aren't you talking today? And he just ignored me and walked off, but he didn't do a doorstop. He came in through the car park. He didn't come out. Scott Morrison spoke outside afterwards. And that's interesting in itself. A lot of people in the Liberal Party were saying, oh, the story's going to be about Tony Abbott, whether he's there or he isn't. We've asked Tony Abbott in previous press conferences if he'd liked some of the Mike Baird gold dust to sprinkle over him in terms of the popularity. And he said that he's happy to get benefits by association, but he certainly wasn't willing to talk, which is interesting and will be noted by some people because at the Labor launch, Bill Shorten got up and spoke at length about Luke Foley.
Okay, well, an interesting week ahead. Of course, voters go to the polls on Saturday. Bridget Glanville, State Political Reporter, thanks so much for speaking to us.
Thanks, Rachel.
Well, the Labor Party has held an anti-privatisation rally at Burwood in Sydney's West, timed to coincide with the New South Wales Liberal campaign launch. The crowd of about 200 people was fired up by a special guest Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews. New South Wales Labor leader Luke Foley says whatever the result next Saturday, Labor will never support selling the electricity network. Mr Foley's also hit back at the Premier Mike Baird's suggestion Labor can't fund its policies.
This election, I can make commitments to delivering more nurses, paramedics, teachers and police than our opponents can. Because we'll keep those profits. We'll keep the profits from the state's electricity network to invest in the frontline workers that serve our community. Mr Baird will send the profits to a private owner and permanently rob the state of the funds it needs to serve our community.
The Northern Territory is being battered by its second major cyclone in as many months. Category 2 cyclone Nathan has crossed the coast, bringing with it wind gusts of more than 150 kilometres an hour. Reporter Jesse Dorset is in Nhulunbuy, and I spoke with him a short time ago.
Yeah, Rachel, it's pretty wild where we are, and we're protected by this wall here. We're shielded by a lot of the wind, so you can imagine what it's like around the rest of the town. Cyclone Nathan has crossed the coast just south of Nhulunbuy. It's packing winds of about 150 kilometres an hour. We certainly haven't felt anything that strong here in Nhulunbuy, but there has been some damage around town. Now, we can't get out just yet, but from where we are, you can see there's already a few trees down over there. We've just got to keep our distance from the wind up there. Now, we're hearing reports that out at Ski Beach, where the boat club is, there have already been quite a few yachts that have been washed up onto the rocks and smashing together. We're hoping that we can get out there a bit later and check them out. There are about 100 people in the evacuation centre at Gove Hospital. They're waiting out the storm. Most people are hunkering down at home. The 2,000 people of Gove are hunkering down in their cyclone-proof homes, Rachel.
And obviously, viewers will be well aware that the Northern Territory was hit by a cyclone just recently. How are people coping with this one? Were they prepared, or were they still sort of in recovery mode?
Well, I'm in the mining town of Nhulunbuy, which is on the very northeastern tip of the Northern Territory. So everyone here was prepared for Cyclone Lam last month. So they cleaned up their yards, they got their supplies together, but that cyclone ended up missing this town. It actually went above it. So everyone here, this is the first cyclone of the year that's hit Nhulunbuy, that's for sure. Now, there are a few differences between Cyclone Nathan, which is what we're experiencing here at the moment, and Cyclone Lam. That was a Category 4, this is a Category 2, so it's not quite as strong. Now, Cyclone Lam actually hit Gallawinku on Elcho Island, which is east of where I am. So certainly people on Elcho Island would be nervous about Nathan. A tent city that was built up in the area to protect people after that cyclone went through had to be pulled down yesterday, so that they you can feel a gust coming through now, so we might just move back in a little bit. Those people on Elcho Island, that tent was packed down as a precaution, and they're also in an evacuation centre. I think there's about 200 people sheltering on Elcho Island, Rachel.
And I understand that's the direction of Cyclone Nathan now is heading towards Elcho Island?
Yeah, it's continuing to move west-northwest. I'm not sure if it's a Category 2 system. I haven't seen the latest advice, so you'd be best to advise me there. But certainly it is expected to be downgraded to a Category 1. If it hits Gallowinku at that strength, it'll still cause a bit of a headache, knocking over trees and causing a mess in a community that is still picking up after Cyclone Lam. The cyclone is then expected to continue moving west over the top of the Northern Territory and then become a tropical low before it dips down and heads towards Darwin as a low.
The Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, has arrived in Vanuatu to check on Australian assistance to the relief effort after Cyclone Pam. Ms Bishop is meeting Vanuatu's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister and will tour the National Disaster Management Office, which is the central body organising the aid efforts. She began her short visit by meeting the young Australian volunteers who were stranded on 2 remote islands for almost a week before consular officials located them and flew them back to the capital.
The humanitarian response has been rapid, not only by the government but by the Australian people. This well of generosity when you see our friends and neighbours in such need has been quite overwhelming. And we're here for the long haul.
Ms Bishop will also visit a primary school which is being rebuilt by Australian search and rescue volunteers before flying back to Brisbane later today. Police are urging people to stay away from underground tunnel systems after a man drowned in floodwaters during a storm in Brisbane. The man was kayaking in drains under the city with his partner yesterday. They'd just entered a tunnel when the water suddenly swelled. Meantime, the SES says it received more than a dozen calls for help after the storm left fallen trees and leaking roofs. Extensive damage has been reported across inland parts of southern Queensland after a hailstorm overnight. Huge hailstones measuring up to 12 centimetres came down with such force they made holes in iron roofs, broke windows and dented cars. The town of Chinchilla recorded more than 75 millimetres of rain in 2 hours as the storm caused power outages and brought down trees. The Weather Bureau says the intensity came from a combination of 2 troughs causing instability. Authorities in Tunisia say they've arrested more suspects in connection with last week's attack at a museum that killed 25 people, including an Australian. It comes as the Tunisian government released footage showing the gunmen involved in the assault. The security camera footage shows the men moving through the building carrying assault rifles and bags. It also captures the moment a visitor comes face to face with the gunman as he tries to flee the building. The attackers point their guns at the man but allow him to leave. The militants were later killed in a gunfight with security forces. Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack. The battle for control of Yemen is intensifying a day after suicide bombers killed 137 people in 2 Shia mosques in the capital Sana'a. 20 Houthi rebels have been killed in fighting with tribesmen in the south. The Houthis appear to be trying to expand the territory they control. The United States has now pulled its forces out of an airbase in southern Yemen.
People in Taiz gather to protest against the arrival of pro-Houthi forces in their city.
They want to drag us into war, and we refuse.
A helicopter flying over a military convoy below was a sign that pro-Houthi forces might be closer to a collision course with President Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi. Hadi has been in Aden trying to hang on to power since he was forced to flee the capital. The editor-in-chief of the Yemen Post says Taiz puts them on the path of least resistance to Aden and the president.
There are those who oppose the Houthis, anti-Houthis, but they're not militants. They're not armed. They're not Al-Qaeda. They will protest against the Houthis, but they will not fight the Houthis. So it's a big difference over there.
As people grappled with the mosque bombings that killed 137 on Friday, President Hadi appeared on television. He said the bombings were an attempt to push the country into a sectarian war, and he needs to ensure the security of Yemenis.
My job as a president is to do that and to invite all the political powers and components, including those who carried out the coup d'etat in order to agree on certain things that will help a lot of the targets and goals of our people.
But negotiations are in trouble. Al Jazeera has learned the UN envoy has left the country. Saudi Arabia has offered to host peace talks, but a Houthi spokesman says they'll only agree to meetings in Sana'a.
Talks in Riyadh will lead to more problems. We need to ask, what is the result of the talks in Riyadh? Results in Riyadh. Who will implement these results?
With talks on hold and the Houthis on the move, the question is whether escalation is inevitable.
1 year since the Ebola outbreak began, and Sierra Leone is conducting a lockdown to combat the virus. The entire population has been ordered to stay indoors for 3 days next week. No one will be allowed to leave their homes, and trading activities across the country will be suspended. About 20,000 people have flocked to the coast of France, hoping to witness the tide of the century waters at the famous island of Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy. They're expected to rise by about 14.5 metres. That's the equivalent of a 4-storey building. The reason it's so high is due to a full moon and this week's solar eclipse, which is creating a surge not seen for almost 20 years. Officials say the tide will come in faster than a person can run. The effects are also being felt along Britain's longest river, where surfers gathered to ride the wave a few kilometres downstream. One young skateboarder is proving the old saying that good things come in small packages. But then Keegan Palmer isn't your average 12-year-old. With professional sponsors and awards won against boarders twice his age, he's loving every minute as he's demonstrating at the national junior titles.
Small kid, big moves. Keegan Palmer was just 2 years old when he first got on a skateboard.
But I got serious at skateboarding when I was around 4.
At age 8, he was already collecting sponsors. Now 12 years old, he was competing today at the inaugural Bowl Riot, a national junior championship event in Melbourne. There were dozens of other young skaters, but all eyes were on this prodigy, who was skating despite an injury.
Well, I broke my wrist just before I was coming down here, so that was a little bummer, but I'm still skating and I'm having a lot of fun.
Keegan has years of international experience. With at least 3 hours of skating a day on the agenda, he squeezes in his schoolwork whenever and wherever he can. He's not fearless, but that doesn't stop him having a go.
If you get scared of something, try it. Try something else that makes you happy and then go for it at the end. And then you feel good afterwards when you land a new trick.
Keegan has tackled some serious tricks in the bowl and earned the respect of seasoned pros.
People know him around the world. He's well renowned as one of the up-and-comers.
Competing in far-flung countries like Brazil and Sweden, Australia's under-18 champion has the full support of his family.
You want to help your kids succeed, you got to do what it takes to help them succeed in anything.
There's no doubt this boy is carving a bright future. Lily Partland, ABC News.
Sport now with Amanda Shalala. And Amanda, we've got a couple of informed teams in the NRL today.
Yeah, and hopefully it's a really good clash, Rachel. The unbeaten Rabbitohs and Tigers have kicked off their round 3 clash at Sydney's Olympic Stadium, and there isn't any score just yet. Last night, Melbourne had a convincing 36-18 win over the Sharks. The Storm was never really troubled as Tohu Harris scored a first-half double, keeping the Sharks winless this season. And in Canberra, the Raiders let an 18-0 lead slip to go down to the Dragons by 2 points.
We lost that game ourselves, and I said to you there earlier, poor pieces of play. Some individual performance tonight that's not first-grade standard. Simple as that.
It's still scoreless between Central Coast Mariners and Perth Glory at half-time of their round 22 A-League match. Glory came closest to scoring in the first half as it looks to reclaim top spot on the ladder from Wellington. Melbourne Victory is now 1 point behind the Phoenix after its 2-2 draw with Adelaide last night. After taking an early lead, the Victory conceded back-to-back goals. And it was up to who else but Archie Thompson to save the day.
Archie Thompson! Incredible 2-2! And the ghost of grand finals past is back to haunt the Reds once once again.
And in the bottom of the table clash, Newcastle Jets finally rediscovered some form, beating Western Sydney 2-1 for their first win since December 19. Manchester City has kept the pressure on English Premier League leader Chelsea following a 3-0 win over West Brom. There seemed to be a case of mistaken identity in the second minute when Craig Dawson brought down Wilfred Bonney. But the referee showed a red card to stunned Baggies defender Gareth McCauley instead. City well and truly capitalised on the advantage. Bonney was in first, then Fernando scored a sloppy second. David Silva finished things off to put City 3 points behind Chelsea. An Olivier Giroud double gave Arsenal a 2-1 win at Newcastle, keeping the Gunners in third spot. And Harry Kane kept up his brilliant breakout season for Tottenham with his first hat-trick in Spurs' 4-3 win over Leicester.
Kane! A second for Harry Kane.
Kane's the Premier League's leading goal scorer with 19. Sydney Swans star Lance Franklin has been knocked out in the Swans' 6-point win over GWS in the pre-season challenge at Monaco Oval. Franklin has been taken to hospital for scans after a nasty head clash with teammate Gary Rowan in the 10th minute. But the club says at this stage there's no serious damage. The match was destined for a draw until Craig Bird swooped on the siren.
Snap! Before the siren! It's a goal to Bird! It's a win to the Swans with a second remaining. Don't worry about 2 draws on the weekend. The Swans have won.
Last night, Western Bulldogs thrashed Collingwood by 61 points, and Magpies recruit Levi Greenwood could miss round 1 after hurting his ankle in the third quarter. The Brumbies have scored an early converted try to take a 7-0 lead over the Waratahs in their Super Rugby clash at the Sydney Football Stadium. This morning, the Western Force looks set to claim an impressive win over the Bulls at Loftus Versfeld. The Australian side scored 3 tries to 1 and hit the lead in the final minutes thanks to a massive penalty goal from C.S. Eberson. But lock Adam Coleman gave away what proved to be the decisive penalty for a dangerous tackle. And the Bulls snatched a 25-24 win.
Oh, he turned immediately. The sweetest of strikes from Andre Pollard.
Pretty angry with that result. You know, discipline was poor throughout the whole game, but you know, to finish on a note like that, it hurts.
It was tight in Durban too, with the Sharks beating the Chiefs 12 points to 11. Ireland has defended its Six Nations rugby title after a remarkable final round. Ireland, Wales and England all had a chance to clinch the championship, with the winner eventually decided on points difference.
Ireland are the obvious Six Nations champions.
Rarely has rugby seen a more extraordinary day of points and pressure in ridiculous quantities, but one in which the prize ultimately belonged to Ireland. They began in a 3-way tie with England and Wales. The Welsh knew only a hefty win against Italy would do, and how they delivered. A George North hat-trick helping them to a 61-20 thumping. The underdogs now suddenly the favourites, but not for long. As Ireland duly embraced the chase, they had to beat Scotland by 21 to overhaul Wales. Difficult? Not when you play like this, as they race past their target with room to spare. 40-10 the final score, now for the waiting game. Only England could deny them, but it was some target to beat France by 26 points.
And so it's all come down to this, the final match of the entire tournament. England face a huge challenge here, but can their fans draw them to the title?
Well, what followed at times almost beggared belief. 90 seconds gone and Ben Youngs crashed over. Twickenham had the perfect start. And from there, the game seesawed amid a deluge of tries. More basketball than rugby. France kept on pegging England back. But with 5 minutes left, Jack Noel made it 55-35. The hosts a converted try from the title. But amid agonising tension, they ran out of time, sparking despair and delight in equal measure.
I've never seen such a courageous performance from a group of players, you know, and I'm hugely proud of what that England team has shown out there today and throughout the championship.
You know, anytime you win a championship, it's just incredible. I don't care what way we play. You know, to win a championship is an amazing achievement and an amazing feeling.
A day then to test the toughest fingernails. Incredible drama, and for Ireland, an unforgettable finish.
New Zealand will face South Africa for a spot in the World Cup final off the back of one of the most incredible individual performances in the history of one-day cricket. Black Caps batsman Martin Guptill set up his side's 143-run quarter-final win over the West Indies, smashing the highest score in tournament history. His 237 not out included 24 fours and 11 sixes, and it was also a New Zealand record.
Beautiful balance as well.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've never had anything like that before, and for it to be here in New Zealand is even better, and to be in a quarterfinals, pretty special as well.
It was a day of highlights for the Black Caps. Daniel Vettori plucked an incredible catch on the boundary. Back on home soil, the Australian team is hoping India is still suffering from the mental scars from its horror start to the summer ahead of their semi-final on Thursday.
I don't think they won a game against us all summer, so hopefully we can make the most of that, and hopefully that's pretty clear in their memories, because we've been dominant all summer in the one-day format, so hopefully we can continue that.
And the Adelaide Thunderbirds have upset the reigning premiers, the Melbourne Vixens, in the Trans-Tasman Netball Championship this afternoon. Thunderbirds captain Renee Hallinan was playing in her 100th game, and her teammates marked the milestone with a strong performance. They held off a late fight back to win by 2 goals and notch up their first victory of the season.
We were really excited to take on the Vixens again, and we knew we had a great crack when we played them in Melbourne, and it's been a really tough block this last month for quality opposition that are all at the top of the tables in their conferences, but I'm just absolutely stoked for the team that we're able to work hard, keep our heads in it for the last month and get a great win against a high quality side like the Vixens.
Let's take a look at the satellite. Tropical cyclone Nathan is crossing the east coast of the Northern Territory, bringing gales, heavy rain and storms. A trough stretching over southern Queensland and northeastern New South Wales is producing showers and storms. Looking around the country, in Queensland, thunderstorms and showers for the majority of the state, fine and mostly sunny conditions in the southwest. Storms and showers for the northeast of New South Wales, very warm inland and a late cool change for the west. In Victoria, it will be warm across most of the state before a cool change, the chance of showers and storms in the east. To Tasmania, rain is forecast across the state, windy conditions expected in the south and west. Showers and isolated storms over the southeast of South Australia. It will be hot in the northeast. Morning showers expected along the south coast of Western Australia, dry and windy in the west. Strong winds and heavy rain is forecast for the east coast of the Northern Territory. It should be dry in the south. Looking ahead to Tuesday's forecast for the capital cities. A possible shower in Brisbane, showers for Sydney and Canberra. Melbourne can expect a shower or 2 clearing. A possible early shower for Hobart, partly cloudy in Adelaide. It'll be sunny in Perth and a possible storm for Darwin. And that is ABC News for now. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Stay with us for Landline.